Here we
Oh
go.
yeah. By the way, everyone, we're recording.
We are recording, and if you don't want to be recorded, this is not the place to be.
Okay.
So welcome everybody to the online empathy circles for bridging political dialogue. I'm Lou Zweier, and I'm been working with Edwin Rutsch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy for about 10 months. I'm hosting this Saturday morning's circle, and Edwin's going to be assisting me. Thanks for everyone coming. And the topic for today is, how do you feel about the US government shutdown? Although, as is the case always, when it's your turn to speak, you can speak about whatever you want. So if there's something else that's really up for you that you want to talk about, you're free to do that. Why don't we go around and just introduce yourself? So if you say your name and where you're from and kind of where you are on the political spectrum, so that when we go to split up into groups to do the empathy circle practice, we have some kind of different perspectives in both groups, or as much as we can. So I'm Lou Zweier, and I'm from Northern California, and I'd say I'd say politically I'm liberal, but I'm also there are some things actually that are typical liberal points of views of stuff that I don't necessarily agree with. So I can go either way.
I'm Edwin Rutsch, and from El Cerrito near Berkeley, California, and I'm on the empathic side, so really want to listen to everyone. You might want to call on people.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
different screens
So
are different.
Mila, you want to go next?
Yeah, my name is Milla. I live in Helsinki, Finland. I guess I would place myself on the left, even though that doesn't feel right. A radical feminist, very much realizing that I live in a male-centered, dominated world.
Thank you. Art?
Hi, everybody. I'm Art Burns. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I've always considered myself a progressive, but I'm questioning that more and more each week that we have these conversations. And I think I just believe in human rights, in environmental rights, and animal rights. I basically believe in, whatever's good for everybody. So that's me.
Thank you. Evan?
I am Evan McGore from Long Island, New York, and I've identified as a liberal mostly, and now I'm just trying to look at humanity through a needs-based approach and just consider everyone's needs.
Thank you. David?
Hello, my name's David. I live in San Francisco. I've been here since 2001. I'm originally from Alabama. For all intents and purposes, I identify on the right. Yes, try to see things through different lenses, so to speak, but due to the nature of the area I live in, I feel a conviction to claim the right here.
Thank you. Tyler?
My name is Tyler. I live in San Francisco. I sort of align. I tend to be on the right these days, it seems. Where I'm sort of coming from is I see the destruction that's been done to men and boys. And I think that a lot of the issues that we have is rooted in toxic feminism that isn't aimed at lifting women up, but destroying men. And I think that's a lot of why we're having trouble with men these days. So I'm into positive masculinity and good men.
Thank you. Bill?
I'm Bill. I live in the East Bay in San Francisco. I would identify on the left, but it's complicated, as I say. And then I'm increasingly finding political labels inadequate and misleading.
Okay. Megan? Thanks for joining us, Megan. We're just doing introductions, your name and where you are or where you're from, and where you sit on the political spectrum, although that may be difficult to decide just because we're trying to figure out how to split up people into groups. And we're not hearing you. I saw a microphone icon and it.
No, no
Okay.
audio.
While Megan is working that out, I'm going to go ahead and just give a brief description of the empathy circle process. I'm guessing, I think everyone here has actually participated in an empathy circle before. So I know you don't actually need this, but for the people watching, just a very brief description. So the idea of the empathy circle process is the purpose of it is for everyone to have a chance to speak and be heard to their satisfaction for what they want to say. And so we use a structured listening process for that. Someone in the circle takes a turn. They have a certain amount of time to speak. I think we're going to do 5 minutes each. And for 5 minutes, that person gets to say whatever's important to them about the topic or whatever is up for them. And before they start speaking, they pick a person in the circle to reflect back what they're hearing the person say. And so during the 5 minutes, the person will speak and pause periodically so that the reflector can reflect back what they're hearing. And if what the reflector reflects back isn't accurate, you could say, no, that's not quite it, and say it again. Or you could say, yes, you got part of it, but you missed this part that's important to me. And so I'd really like you to hear this. And so that goes on until the person's time is up, or you don't have to use the whole 5 minutes if you don't want. And when it's the end of your turn, if you feel heard, which hopefully you do, you can signal that by saying, I feel heard. And then the listener becomes the speaker, and they select someone else in the circle to speak to. And we kind of we don't require that you pick any particular person, but we kind of require or ask that when you go to you pick someone who has not reflected yet in that round of conversations, so that everyone gets a chance to speak, and the speaking and listening goes around the circle, and not just like back and forth between two people. I think that's it. If you're the listener and the person is not really pausing for you to reflect, and you're feeling like, I can't hold everything I'm hearing, you can say to the person, the speaker, you could say, can you please hold on a second and let me reflect back what I'm hearing so far? And the facilitator in the circle, which will be me or Edwin, if that's not happening and we're worried that it's going on for too long, we might ask the speaker to pause. We might intervene and ask the speaker to pause to do that. And one thing that's different about this process is the facilitator is a participant. We're like a full participant. We take a turn, we speak, and we say what's on our mind, and we get reflected back. So it really is, everyone is more or less equal. The facilitator tends to have a little bit more experience doing the process than others. So but really it's everyone's job to monitor the process and see that it's happening okay, and to say something if they think it's not being followed. That's really, anyone can do that. Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments before we move on? Okay, so Megan, have you got your audio working now? I'm seeing can you hear me, Megan? Can you shake your head if you can hear me? You can. Okay. Do you want to try to say something? See if we can hear you.
She posted something on the chat.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm new on the phone that is crappy. Once my other phone charges, I will switch. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you for using the chat. And thank you, David, for letting me know that. Okay. So Edwin, do you want to break people up into groups?
Okay, we'll go into 2 groups. You'll lead one, I'll do the other one, and I think we're ready to go. And then if you want to record in your group, you'll need to set the recording.
Okay.
So let's do that. Open all rooms. Should see an announcement there. Join. Okay, so here we go, and see. So Megan, I guess you'll just be able to hear us until you get the new phone, and then Mila will will need to leave in about an hour, you were saying. So just want to bring that up to begin with. And we had our topic, which was Lou forgot to mention it, which is about the government shutdown. How do you feel about the government shutdown? Or you can talk about anything that is alive for you as well. So since everyone is familiar with the process, anyone want to start to, pick the person to speak to, and maybe I'll even do it. And how to keep time too. So stopwatch. We're doing 5-minute rounds, and I'll speak to Evan.
All right, I'm listening.
Okay, so yeah, regarding the government shutdown, for me, I feel like it's a missed opportunity. I feel a lot of frustration because I'm trying to see how we can move the empathy movement forward, and it seems to me right now would be the time to set up an Occupy Empathy on the Capitol Mall and say we're here until the Democrats and Republicans have empathy circles with each other. So it would be sort of a really good time for doing something like that, but I just don't have the resources to pull that off.
Okay, so you're feeling frustrated about the government shutdown. You feel like it's a missed opportunity, and at the same time, you feel like it's this would have been a great time to do an Occupy Empathy sort of event, and get Democrats and Republicans to better talk to each other. But you just don't have the resources to do that event right now.
Yeah, and the first thing I thought of was Megan, who is not. We've been talking about this, about taking sort of more of a coercive, sort of action like that, and she's like, not really happy. She doesn't feel comfortable with that. So I kind of just thought of that because we want to have, we'd like to have a discussion at some point to talk about that, like. With an empathy movement, how to move an empathy movement forward in an empathic way. And, is coercion part of that? And so I'm just kind of, that's sort of a topic, like it's a fine needle to thread to do empathic political action in an empathic way.
Right. So you're thinking about, moving the empathy movement forward, but you thought of how Megan was thinking that, or maybe had some resistance to the idea of doing it in a way that might be seen as coercive. So we're just kind of figuring out, how to move an empathy movement forward with an empathic mindset or strategy that sort of is consistent with the message.
Yeah, and I had created an event for Sacramento to do some kind of an event in Sacramento to have the politicians, do a left-right dialogue in some way, to get attention for the empathy movement and add some sort of some kind of an action component or some kind of a social action component to it. So it's just, how to do that effectively is just something I want to bring up. And I just see like right now would be the perfect time to launch something like that in Washington because there's so many people, who are frustrated about this, and I think it would get a lot of support.
Okay, so you're seeing like social action being really imperative right now, especially with what's going on with the shutdown. So you feel like you could kind of capitalize on so many people being frustrated, and might be a really good time to do something like that.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thanks.
Okay, great. I will select Mila if you'll listen to me. Cool. Yeah, I'm not feeling personally frustrated by the government shutdown, but I know it's affecting a lot of people. So I certainly don't feel great about that, and I'm definitely not happy about the government being shut down. Maybe I'll pause there.
So it's a topic that doesn't speak to you a lot personally right now, but you're aware of that it's affecting a lot of people.
Yeah. Um, I was thinking about it this morning, and I was just thinking about how in TV and movies, I feel like it's always a bad guy move to sort of take something hostage and say, you know what, like these people are going to suffer until you give me what I want.
So you're kind of reflecting on how you feel about people making statements about what they want. Yeah, and
yeah, and more just the fact that like usually it's the bad guys in movies that take people hostage to get what they want.
so kind of having a moral judgment around it, that it's not a good thing to yeah, okay, I just repeat what you say. That it's usually a bad guy move to take people hostage to get what you want. Like,
Yeah, at least that's what I'm used to seeing in movies and TV. I'm not judging it myself, but I'm sure there are a lot of people judging these actions. And I wonder if a lot of the people judging these actions would also take something hostage to get what they want if they really believed in something that it would, help solve the world's problems.
so I'm kind of hearing how you want to see what's there behind, like, the action of what I'm hearing you say is that you want like overall understanding for people's actions, like what's behind it, and kind of, is
I
it
mean,
off?
sure, I want that too, but what I'm really saying here is that I'm not judging Trump's actions. And I'm sure my theory would be that a lot of people who are judging his actions probably would do something similar for things that they believed in.
Mm. So you don't have any judgments about what's going on, because you can relate to people acting in all kinds of ways, and you're thinking about what other people who might judge Trump for what he's doing, like if they can relate to acting in similar ways at times.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
So he's done, and it's your turn to select who you'd like to speak to, and you can select to anyone, I guess, except Megan, who's
Yeah.
not working yet.
So, I guess that's David by default. Are you okay with listening?
Okay.
Yeah. I have nothing to say on the topic because I live in my own little bubble where I focus on my own things. I do find the situation crazy, but I think craziness kind of goes everywhere where there's people.
Okay, you said that you don't really have an opinion on our shutdown because you don't even live here, basically, and that you do think it's crazy, but you think that people are crazy, so everywhere is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it goes from smaller groups to larger groups. So yeah. I'm mostly on the call just to get over my initial nervousness of getting used to this format and to see the people and like interact, to kind of get more used to it. That's my purpose for being here right now.
Okay, you said that your purpose for being here is basically this is like a warm-up exercise for you to get used to the format and be more comfortable and participating in something like this.
Mm. If Yeah, just thinking in general about how to make things work and creating all these weird systems that we agree on and end up not working so well, and how to say no to certain things and how to create things that work in a different way. Like, I guess this call is about that as well, trying to create a different way than what's happening in the government right now, in your government.
I'm a little unclear, but I'll try to, I think what you were saying is that there's lots of systems in place that maybe doesn't work very well, and you're open to new ideas on how people deal with each other for better results.
Yeah, I guess wherever there are people, there are kind of some ways of interacting that exist, whether they're explicit or implicit, and how to make decisions about stuff, how to make it like daily life work in a way. I guess that's the reason behind these systems being in place, like just trying to get things to function. And
sorry, I'm not trying to be specific. If you could you be a little bit more specific when you say these and that? Because it's kind of hard to reflect that back.
Yeah. Like groups of people deciding things together, like a family or a school class or a country, or we all, or a workplace, whatever, we all decide together like how to function together. Like we create a culture together in order to get things working.
Okay. Whether the group is a country or a school or a workplace, we all figure out ways to work and communicate with each other.
Yeah, and government has come out of this intention of trying to get things to run smoothly. I guess it's a part of it, but then it's not a system that makes that much sense to me.
Okay, and you feel like the government is just a larger version of these smaller systems of people working, communicating with each other, but a lot of the stuff on this scale of government doesn't make much sense to you.
Yeah, and right now I feel weirded out because I feel like I get to floating out and get too philosophical about stuff, and then like, oh, I'm not making sense. So yeah.
And so right now you feel a little weirded out because maybe the more you talk, the less you lose focus and you become more broad and less general and less specific, perhaps.
I feel I'm quite clear within myself, but it's how to, in a short time, make my thinking clear to other people. That's a bit.
And okay, you feel that within yourself it feels very clear, but it can be kind of hard to communicate concisely, I guess would be the word. What do you feel clear about inside with?
Works for me. I don't have any need for any more time. Thanks for reflecting.
You can just say, I feel fully heard, and that's the transition. Then it's when you're done. Okay.
I never feel fully heard. I'm ready. Next person.
Okay.
Okay. I guess I'll just continue the rotation. Is Megan still out of the picture? I mean, without sound, right? No. So charging phone. All right. So I'm going to go back to Edwin.
Okay.
Government shutdown. So this is really a discussion on immigration, and I think walls are effective. And as far as the nuts and bolts of how the government works and how people do think, how whatever leverage they use to get things done, I don't really care. As long as it's not like bombing people or something. That's kind of bad.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the government shutdown, it has another issue behind it, and that's immigration. And you're saying that, hey, the walls work, boundaries work, and that in terms of strategies, doesn't really matter unless it's, something harmful, violent. Otherwise, whatever strategies works is fine.
Mm,
Was
yeah.
that it?
Yeah. Well, the end part is as long as it's harmful. I mean, everything people do is harmful. I mean, as long as it's not something over the top like bombing cities or something.
Uh-huh. Okay, so kind of any action can be harmful in some way, and as long as the action isn't, bombing cities, and I guess that's kind of the line where you draw the line.
Yeah. Yeah, my line's pretty far out there. All right. Yeah, I feel like walls work. I think it's an important issue. It's something this president got elected on, and I feel like with all his faults, one thing can be said is that he's actually pursuing a lot of promises he made on the campaign trail, which a lot of presidents kind of will abandon a lot of stuff they promised on the campaign trail.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that Trump campaigned on this and he won, and this was one of his big issues, and you have you see that he has his faults, but I guess there's maybe a sense of admiration that he kind of does try to put through the things that he said he was going to do.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, might be a snarky comment or something, but that's the only way I think. I feel like if over the border, if across the border there was a bunch of white Republicans trying to get in, the Democrats would want a 1,000-foot wall up.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that this might be sort of a snarky comment, but if it was Republicans on the other side of the wall, then the Democrats would want a big wall, and because, yeah, you didn't say why, but just
because it's about elections and politics. A lot of it, a lot of people that come over, the Democrats promise them free stuff basically for votes. It's like importing votes as far as I'm concerned, instead of dealing with people who've already established here and, actually, are building this country, whose families have built this country over the generations.
Yeah, so you're saying that you feel that from the Democrats' point of view that they're wanting immigration because these are people that will vote for them. And instead of focusing on people who are already here for generations, that's kind of you're kind of saying that you feel that's what their motivation is.
Mm-hmm. And I feel that I have nothing against Mexico, but if you want to, I don't want to live there. And if you want to live in Mexico, move to Mexico. If you import Mexicans, we'll get Mexico. Do you like Mexico? You should move to Mexico. United States, we're prosperous and wealthy, and a lot of it has to do with our culture and the way we do things.
Yeah, so you're saying, I guess, to the Democrats who want to have immigration from Mexico, that you have concern that it would change the culture here, and you're, again, maybe being a little snarky or what have you, for Democrats that they should move to Mexico if they like the culture so much, that instead of importing it here, just go over there.
Yes. I think all these are valid concerns. I think anyone who doesn't want a wall should leave their front door unlocked, should take their lock out of their door. Doors and walls are not racist. They're barriers. They work.
That barriers and walls are not like racist. People have them around their house and so forth. So it's just something that people do, and walls work for creating boundaries.
You left out the part where I think people who are against the wall should take the locks out of their front door. And door altogether.
So you feel that people who are against the wall should take the locks out of their house, and that's 5 minutes too.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Then I'll speak to Mila. something else in this immigration discussion that I think that's not really seen as the empathy component of it, and that's something I wanted to talk about. It's like the role of empathy in dealing with immigration, and yeah, just reflect that back.
You would like to have an emphasis on empathy when speaking of immigration.
Yeah, and there's an aspect of empathy that's not really seen, is that a lot of the people who are coming, like in these recent, migrations, are from Central America, where the countries are very dysfunctional. There's a lot of violence, a lot of poverty. And it seems to me that people aren't talking about addressing having like empathy support, that it's building cultures of empathy in those environments so that people can work through their issues and their problems. So, it's kind of hard for America to be talking about that when it's not the most empathic country itself, which is what we're trying to address here in these circles. So it's if we can build a culture of empathy in the United States, but that we can also support other countries in building cultures of empathy. To address, for them to be able to address all the challenges they have of poverty and crime and so forth. Because I do think it's that cultural shift that can really make the cultural, to change things, those systems, that you keep talking about.
So you're recognizing that in many countries there's injustice and violence and power not shared equally, and you would like for there to be empathic cultures shared everywhere, and also kind of recognizing that the country that you're living in is not the most empathic culture
either. Yeah. So that's really what I want to do. Kind of the approach I want to take is, building cultures of empathy, and that and I see the same thing in Europe, which is, where you are, is that there's a lot of migration, economic refugees, political refugees, war refugees coming up from Africa and the Middle East. And those wars, like Syria, the war in Syria is essentially an empathy deficit. It's a country that's just falling apart because of the lack of empathy between the different factions and the different sides. So the real core to me is, creating these cultures of empathy is the way to kind of a core way to get to the root of the problem. I mean, people need support as refugees. My family were refugees after World War II, so I have some understanding of that. So people need immediate support. But the deeper root cause seems to me to be the lack of cultures of empathy in all these places.
So you kind of want to take away a focus from individuals seeking to have safety and take care of themselves and their families, but to more look at the overarching systems, maybe as well how rich and poor countries are like interacting, where it comes from, but also to for you a solution would be to have the type of listening and understanding and getting people to collaborate, like to really see them as persons, as people everywhere throughout in the systems.
Yeah, so for me, instead of $10 billion for a wall, I would put in $10 billion for empathy training in the country, and then also in the world. I'd put in $20 billion. I think $10 billion is not enough. So and that's why I want to do this Occupy Empathy, to kind of advocate, because nobody's going to take it seriously unless we are kind of have more social action for this.
Yeah, so you're kind of in pain of the idea of putting a lot of money into a wall rather than, because you don't see the use in it, and you would more like to put those means into something that builds people up, like to care for one another, to understand one another, and yeah, that this
Yeah.
is the direction that you would like to head.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thanks.
So my turn. I have nothing to say. Like
Okay, just select someone, speak to them, say you have nothing to say. They'll reflect back and say you're heard, and then
okay, so I guess Megan, you can't still. There's no. You have no voice. No. So Evan, nice to meet you, and it's your turn to speak.
Okay. I think also just we should maybe mention, like, you don't have to talk about the issue that we're talking about, right? You can talk about issues in your country if you want. You can talk about anything you want right now.
anything that's alive for you.
Yeah, like I said, my purpose to join the call was just to get over this initial nervousness of joining the calls, and to be on here, and to, yeah. So I feel I'm getting that already. Yeah.
Do you mind if I reflect that back?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so you feel like you're already fulfilling the purpose that you have for the call, which is to sort of get used to the format.
Actually, and then I'm actually thinking of, very often if I'm speaking, like, it can go either way. I feel people hear me very differently. Like, so I do have a nervousness around getting heard. Yeah.
So you have a nervousness around getting heard, and you feel like sometimes people hear you differently.
Yeah, that I thought it was beautiful what David says, like that I can't concisely put what it is that I'm thinking into something short that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so you thought what David said was nice, just talking about how to put things concisely.
Yeah, that's the issue I have when speaking. So with that said, I'm done, and I'd gladly pass the word on.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I'll bring it back to David.
Whoa.
Yeah, so there is something about the immigration topic that I enjoy, which is, I think there's the concept of entitlement. It's not my favorite word, but I can't think of anything better. But sort of like the idea that Americans are entitled to America.
You have an issue. One issue you have with the immigration issue is that Americans feel entitled to America.
Yeah. And it's just interesting the way that the world has gotten to the place where it is now, because up until recently, we all fought and killed and, got into shady deals and conquered, and then the countries that exist now exist because of, winners and losers and in wars.
You find it interesting that how do we get to this point that we are today due to a history of wars, backstabbing, deals made, to the point where we have what we have today as far as like who has what and the situation on the ground right now.
Yeah. And I feel like the world has kind of accepted, okay, we're getting away from the wars, to some degree, but we're kind of accepting where the governments sit now. Like America owns America, the UK owns the UK, and it's just like, okay, we're settled now. Let's not reverse what we've done, but let's just try to move forward from here.
Okay, You think it's interesting how we've reached the point today where borders seem to be more static, and like America, and people do not want that disturbed because we've, relatively speaking, we haven't had any like huge wars in a while over territorial disputes.
Yeah. Well, I know there's still a lot of wars going on, but you don't need to reflect that. But
I got the
and
gist of it though, right?
I'm sorry.
I got the gist of it though, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're good. I was just gonna add more. But there's really no, God-given rights for anyone to own any land, right? That's what I always ask the question. Like, God has never come down to me and said, no, these people definitely own this land. Like, it's all kind of up for grabs in a way still today in my mind, because there's no really like overarching, like, something above humans that says that somebody should own a certain piece of land over another.
I'm not sure if this is too short of me breaking it, condensing it, but basically what you're saying, people don't have a God-given right to anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I guess maybe my last thought will be, what really defines an immigrant? And, considering that, what is an immigrant? It's just somebody moving to a different, area where a different tribe currently sits. So I feel like there's no shoulds or shouldn'ts. There's just, what's the best way we can prevent suffering, but also help people?
Okay, you're wondering basically what technically defines what an quote-unquote immigrant, and I missed that second part.
So I guess I just feel like there are no shoulds or shouldn'ts in, given that, that no one really has a God-given right to any particular group of land. It's just, my question that I want to pose is, how can tribes help each other and prevent suffering, all at the same time? Like, I feel like that should be the question.
You feel like ultimately there's no divine right to anything, and that you would think the best that we can do is different tribes or countries, whatever, figure out the best way of helping each other or help alleviate suffering all around.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Are you done?
Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. All right. So, Megan, you still out? Okay, a little bit more. All right. So I guess, I like the even rotation, so I'm going back to Edwin.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, so to talk about the shutdown is essentially a talk about immigration. And that's the reason the shutdown's here is I feel like it's a topic that it's an uncomfortable one. And a lot of people have kind of pushed it under the rug. And Trump, in true Trump fashion, is sticking out like a sore thumb and forcing people to look at this one way or another.
So really the shutdown is about the immigration issues, and that Trump is, forcing people to talk about this. He's just not sweeping it under the carpet. He said, this is it. And it sounds like maybe you have some appreciation for, bringing this topic up.
Yes, it's not an easy topic, and a lot of people are self-conscious. They want to be looked at as xenophobic or racist or whatever. But it's a natural, understandable concern. Like, I don't think a lot of people called. It was recently there was an island of people that don't have contact with the outside world. I forgot what you call those kind of people that are, I guess, isolated civilization, so to speak. And in true xenophobic style, they killed someone, an intruder that was trying to get on the island. and that I think that's further proof that it's a natural instinct to protect what's yours from outside, quote unquote, foreigners.
So you feel it's a natural sort of a biological way of being is to protect yourself from. Oh, Megan, just a second. You're assigned to. Is this your other?
I think she's trying to connect.
She's trying to join with her other call, so I keep a track on that. So yeah, so it's like that tribe that killed the missionary. It's like they were trying to protect themselves, and that's xenophobic, right? And that's just showing that it's tribes protect themselves, and it's just sort of natural way of being.
Yes. So, like, I think it's a cheap shot for people to focus on racism and xenophobia when it's not something everyone not. It's something that I feel like everyone has. It's instinctual, and it's not fair to make pot shots about people, especially people who are trying to be decent people. But there's things about all of us that we're not proud of, and that we try to be better people, but it's not good to deny that it's there. Period.
Okay, so you're seeing like in this debate, in this discussion, people are being judged as being
discussions in general.
Oh, in general. Okay, so in general, people get judged for being xenophobic and, what?
Or racist.
Or racist. So people get judged for these things and it was, I guess, kind of a discomfort in the judgment, and then also that this is part of biology or how people are too. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's something to definitely try to overcome, but for someone to basically dispel all that element and put it on their opposition is not fair, and it's insincere. Well, it's enough of that.
Okay. So kind of using this as a technique. Yeah. So kind of using this as a technique to shut people down is not fair. So,
no, it's not. And, I wanted to reflect. How much time do I have?
1 minute.
1 minute. I want to reflect on what Evan said. Yeah, we have reached a point in world history where world war is not possible anymore. That hasn't been possible since the invention of nuclear weapons due to mutually assured destruction.
So world war isn't really an option because of nuclear weapons. So you just wanted to acknowledge that, or?
Yeah, and it's not an option due to mutually assured destruction. And I think culturally, the world has been adjusting to that because that's been the natural way of deciding disputes and borders since the dawn of time. And so now we're reached the point of how do we settle disputes of land and power now?
Okay, so previously through history, the different countries or different boundaries different tribes were solved by war, but now we can't do that because everybody would die. So it's kind of a question of how do we solve these border boundary disputes?
Yes, and that's going to be very interesting. That's the reason why a lot of people might laugh when I say culture war, but this is very real, because if the cultural war proves ineffective, a cultural war decides whether or not there's going to be real war, and there's a lot at stake.
So there's a deep kind of a culture war going on, and that culture war kind of is this making decisions, and there's things at stake in this culture war.
Yes, there is, and man, there's so much more.
Yeah, that was time though. It come around again. So,
I'm just going to say bye quickly.
Okay.
I enjoyed being here, and I will listen to what you say later.
All right.
Thanks.
Glad you could join us, and hope to see you next time, and talk more about organizing some of these together. So, bye. Megan, are you there, Megan? Is it working, your audio?
It should be, but it sounds like it's not.
Yeah, it's like really, can you get really close to the
Oh, can you hear me now?
Barely. I mean, you'd have to put your put the mic right on your,
Can you hear me now?
yeah. So
Okay.
can I speak to you?
Yes.
Okay, then let me see. Where am I? Yeah, I guess it comes back to me to, in all these discussions, to see what is the empathic approach. I understand I can value boundaries. I understand there's boundaries. I got locks on my door. We got fence around the house. So there is that aspect of boundaries, and that's part of life, and so we do need to be aware of that.
So you're saying that you're always wondering what the empathic approach is,
Yeah.
and you can understand boundaries. You have locks on your house and a fence around your property, but you're still wondering what is the empathic approach.
Yeah, and so I can understand, there's economic migrants, wanting to come to Europe or the United States. I mean, there's a whole world of economic migrants who would want to move, and so, there are laws there are boundaries that you want to be an economic migrant doesn't automatically mean that you can come to the United States. There's processes, there's a certain amount of people are allowed, the country takes in. So there are laws that, it seems that, and the country and the people have voted on those laws. And so I do understand the importance of that just opening the borders and any economic migrant that wants to come in. I can, unless the country, everybody agrees on that, that's, I can understand that having boundaries around that.
Okay, so you're saying that you understand, you can understand why there are limitations on people migrating, like to the U.S. or Europe for economic opportunities, and you can understand why there are limitations on how many people can come and under what circumstances, and that since people have voted on that, the people living in those places, that you can be okay with that or support that.
Yeah.
There's limitations.
And then the other part is the empathic aspect, because it's usually like sort of feeling sympathy for the economic migrants, or people from difficult situations or coming from Syria. So people just have sort of a sympathetic response. And it seems to me that the empathic response is to support building cultures of empathy in those environments. So in Syria, if there'd been a huge investment in, having empathy circles like in Syria, or even the refugee camps, be training, holding training for empathy, cultures of empathy, that's really the positive way forward, that the rest is just sort of band-aids. So it's really, that's sort of my solution, is we have to spread what we're doing here.
Okay. So you're saying that you see that often the response to refugees is to have sympathy.
Yeah.
Feel sorry and want to help people, but that you think the real solution is empathy, promoting a culture of empathy in the places where people are fleeing, and helping people achieve some sort of good stability through an empathic culture.
Exactly, because that'll head off the problems. We got to start heading off all the problems that are going to come up in the future. So it's just leaving things as they are, taking in refugees doesn't solve the root problem. It's it's building this global culture of empathy that I think has the most hope and potential, is what I feel.
Yeah, you see that promoting a culture of empathy would head off the problem in an earlier stage of ending up in a situation where people are seeing violence, and well, you didn't say that part, but that that you think that would be a more get to the root of things. more than
Exactly.
taking
Yeah.
on refugees.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel heard. Thanks.
All right. Before I start, I want to try calling in on.
I think we lost your audio for a second here.
No, no audio.
She was said she was going to try something else.
Are you going to try to hang up and call back? Is that what you're saying? Shake your head.
I don't. Do you see her? Oh, you shake your head. You're making. I don't.
We don't hear you.
Yeah, I think. Oh, I do. I see just a shadow of her.
What do we do?
I guess we'll have to go whoever wants to speak next.
I think it's Evan's turn, and then if she pops back, we can go back to Megan after
Okay.
Evan's done.
That works.
Sure. I'll pass it back to David. Yeah, I liked where you were going with the response to my comment about how do we decide now that we have mutually assured destruction, how do we decide borders and things like that, without having world wars. I think that's really interesting. And then you brought up a cultural war. So I'm wondering if that's really interesting to me too. I wonder if you're talking about, different cultures trying to expand and spread, almost in like a war, because it's like, if a lot of one group dominates, areas in one state in the country, let's say, and then people feel sometimes like that's encroaching on their culture that they've already established in that state. Is that almost like a cultural war? That's really interesting. Is that I'm wondering if it's a fight, because I'm not certainly fighting.
Can you hold up?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, you said that you liked my comment on how we can't establish borders like we used to the old way through warfare due to atomic weapons and mutually assured destruction. And you thought it was interesting as well, me talking about the culture war that we have now, that how people from one culture can move to another culture, and the people of that existing culture will feel like their boundaries are being encroached upon by a culture they've already established.
Right. Should we check in with Megan here to?
It's up to you. Yeah, Megan, can you hear? Or can you talk?
Megan, you there? All right, I guess I'll keep going.
All right.
So yeah, for me personally, because I don't know what people are thinking, but I know for me personally, I get the feeling of being encroached on, but at the same time, I'm like, cultures are constantly mixing and more. I figure if we just let ourselves mix, maybe like the best stuff from each culture will stick. Like whatever the best traditions are from each culture, those are the ones that will stick. And so if we just keep letting ourselves mix, all the best stuff will rise to the top, maybe.
You said that you can understand how people might feel upset about this stuff, but you also feel like that maybe allowing or cultures to mix more, that all the best stuff from each culture will float to the top, and the result might be a better culture.
Yeah.
Hey Megan, are you
Go for it.
Are you video on one phone and like sound on the other?
Yeah, I dialed in. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go back to you after Evan.
Yeah, we have another minute and a half for Evan.
Sorry, take your time, Evan.
Dialing in's a great idea, by the way. I don't know why I didn't think of that. That's great. Yeah. So, I mean, there are maybe a good argument for that is there are groups in the country that are statistically just much better off in a lot of ways. Like Asians, for example, are much more successful financially and in school and all that stuff. So, mixing our cultures together and trying to figure out what this culture is doing right and that culture is doing right, and all of us just mixing and letting go of our identities. I kind of like that to some degree. Like, let's just do whatever furthers humanity and forget about like, oh, this is, this is just the way I was raised and that's the way I want to do things. Like, I get that, but I'm personally not attached to that.
Okay, you said that you feel like like different people or cultures have their strengths. You gave an example for Asian Americans being very successful financially and good schools and stuff, and that you personally don't feel super attached to your culture, so you feel like you're able to be a little more loose with that, with experimenting with mixing of the cultures to, maybe create a sum that's greater than its parts, to paraphrase.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
So we probably should jump back to Megan.
Yeah. Would you want to select someone?
Okay. I'll talk to David.
Hello.
If you're open again. Hi. Can you hear me better now than before?
Yeah, I can hear you better, yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, I just want to say that I was feeling really anxious when I was trying to call back in. That was super stressful. I also want to say that that there's just a lot that I think I see really differently from kind of what you were saying, David, about like immigration. And I don't even know where to start, kind of. And it's like I wouldn't be able to like address like all the things that I think I would like to bring up in this conversation. So I'm trying to focus on like what will be the most important. So I'll stop there.
Okay, you said that you were feeling anxious with the connecting and reconnecting with the phone calls and stuff, and that you, after hearing what I said about this on this topic of immigration and stuff, that you have such different ideas compared to what I have that you don't even know where to start as far as addressing.
Yeah, and I'm trying to like think, just kind of discern like what would be the most important thing that kind of gets to the root.
You're trying to figure out, how to get to the root of like how you feel about immigration or the differences between our.
Yeah, like the different ways that people are seeing the issue, and I don't know if this is actually the root. I mean, I don't know if there really can be like one thing, but
it's not. Anyway,
one thing that comes to me is now, and I want to acknowledge that this might be like generalizing somewhat. I'm not sure if you've said things to this effect, but generally it seems like from the conservative or point of view, people want to deny any responsibility for things their ancestors did. Like, I wasn't a slave owner, or like even if my great 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 grandfather was a slave owner, that doesn't, like, I have no responsibility for that. I don't even know if that's the correct number of greats. But then I heard you say that you want people who have lived here for generations and like built up the country to benefit from it. And to me, that sounds like trying to take credit for like the good things that one's ancestors did. And I think that, if you're going to take credit for things your ancestors did, you have to either take credit for all of it or none of it.
Okay. All right. You're trying not to first. you said that you're trying to get to the root of the problem, but the best you can come up with at the moment, and not to generalize, is that you feel like from the conservative side that people do not do not want to take credit for things that their ancestors did. But you also mentioned that I mentioned people wanting to protect something that their past generations have created, and you said, and you believe that that's like wanting to take credit for all the good things that my ancestors did, at the same time not taking responsibility for all the bad things my ancestors may or might have done.
Yeah. Like I guess I'm just wanting consistency. Like either we need to be be like, okay, my ancestors did this, and so maybe have like a right to this, but also they did this bad thing, so I have some responsibility to correct it. Or it's like I'm not responsible for anything my ancestors did. Like I'm just here and I'm a person, and it's nothing to do with me, kind of.
Okay, you'd like to see more consistency, not just take as far as like fault or credit for past generations. That essentially that's what you said. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't know how to wrap that up.
Yeah. I mean, can you hold up fingers or something, Edwin, for how many minutes I have left? Okay. I guess I just want to say that, like, we've been talking about like leftist stonewalling dialogue, which is also like an overgeneralization. Obviously, there's like lots of leftists in these circles, or at least like progressive liberals, but like building a wall is like the biggest non-figurative stonewall. Like we need dialogue not just within countries, but like between people from different countries. And like we should be having, I would like us to have empathy circles with the people who are like between us and like the people who don't want immigration and the people who are immigrating, including, like without permission.
Okay, you've noticed people bring up the term stonewall when describing leftists, and you find that peculiar because you see a lot of leftists in these empathy circles in particular, and that you feel like building a wall is quite literally stonewalling, and that the problem could be solved. Could we have a better solution in dialogue and empathy with our neighboring states?
With people, not even from states, but just between people who live in different places, like the people here who don't want immigration and the people who are immigrating. Like, let's have empathy circles.
You feel like empathy circles is... Oh, sorry. Are you done?
Not time, but I don't think citizenship is like a great criteria to decide who we're going to dialogue with. Like, just because you and I search citizenship, like, why should we be more empathetic to each other? It's totally random. Like, we just happen to be born here. We should empathize with everybody who is affecting our lives and we're affecting their lives.
Okay, you feel like that we should empathize with everyone, no matter where we are or what barriers are between us?
Well, specifically if we're affecting each other's lives, especially.
Okay, you feel like, and you also applied that we all affect each other's lives, I'm assuming, right?
I mean, there's degrees. There's degrees.
Well, what you did say is if we do affect each other's lives, that we should have empathetic conversations or contact.
Yeah, communication. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I guess I'll just go over to Edwin.
Okay, there's a jackhammer in the background. So
I can't hear
it.
Okay. Yeah. Where to start? Yeah. First of all, I like to point out the fact that all four of us are surrounded by four walls, yet we're still having empathetic conversations with one another.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to point out that we do have walls here, and that we are at the same time having empathic conversation.
Yeah.
So the two are, you can have both.
Yeah, I'm saying you can have walls and you can have empathetic conversations. That's one of the beauties of modern communication. And I feel like modern communication can be the biggest um, helpful saving grace, or like the biggest calamity in our modern age.
So this communication, this new communication, I guess, meaning like here doing like Zoom, that this, or just social media, can be destructive, negative, or it could also be, you know, real positive.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are very open about letting a lot of foreign influence into their lives or cultures, like they're okay with that, and which, like, it's supposed to be some kind of universal good. I don't view it as a universal good. I don't trust anyone. I don't trust anyone. You know, I don't trust people. I take calculated risks, and I think it's one difference between liberals and conservatives is that, you know, think about us what you may, but we are, you know, very reality based people.
Very what?
Reality based.
Oh, okay. So you feel that conservatives, and yourself included, are reality-based people, and that seeing that, you know, people can do harm to you, and, you know, so the importance of protection, just not letting everyone in, because yeah, I guess because things are dangerous and you have to protect yourself, and that's sort of reality.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I went to a talk once. I can't think of the guy's name. He's a very popular conservative speaker. But he mentioned something, and he was actually debating two liberal debate club members in Berkeley. And he closed it out. He asked the students, inherently, do they think that people are good? And he thinks a big difference between conservatives and liberals is that liberals feel that people deep down are good, and that conservatives don't think that, that deep down that we are good. And he had a theory about that.
Mm-hmm. So you're seeing a difference between sort of worldviews between conservatives and liberals, that at a deep level, conservatives feel that people are bad, and then liberals feel that people are good, and that that's a deep sort of a philosophical difference between the two.
I just now remembered his name. Yeah, I feel hurt. His name was Dennis Prager, and then he ended it by saying he had a theory about why these kids, a lot of them kids, feel like people are inherently good. And he said, and trusting perhaps, is that because these kids, or and liberals in general, might feel that way because they live in the U.S. and maybe they're a little spoiled by how civilized our structure is, and that the world is it's very violent and crazy place, and that our peace is very unnatural here.
Mm-hmm. So the reason you think, the person is making the case that why liberals might think that, or young liberals might think that the world is a safe place, is they're sort of in this safe bubble here, and that really the world is dangerous out there if you get outside of that bubble, and they're not aware of that.
Yes. And me having a strong feeling that inherently people are not good doesn't mean I'm a misanthrope or anti-human, so to speak. I've been through that phase. But how should I put it? That there's a reason why I like barriers and walls, and I don't trust people, and I do things with a grain of salt. And I don't judge, because that's the way nature works in general. Look in the animal kingdom. It's not a very pathetic place. And one reason to go back, we need to stop here.
Okay, so you're kind of this worldview that the world is a dangerous place. It has, support for it, and it's nature, just if you look at nature, that shows that it's dangerous. You know, the animals killing each other and stuff like that, I imagine. So that kind of gives support for the dangerous worldview.
Yes. And as far as taking credit or taking blame for what my ancestors did, I think a lot of people try to take out of context the time things happened and that time in history that slavery took place, etc. You know, and how conquests happened throughout the world, throughout history. You have to look at it in context of that time and place. You can't judge the past standards reached today from struggles of the past. So, like, our ancestors did not deal with it.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of looking at the history, kind of what the responsibility for our history is you have to look at the context within what the social norms were or what have you, and take that into account when, you know, deciding about slavery or some of these other issues.
Okay.
And I think that's your time too.
Can you say one more thing?
Yeah, just quick.
Just one more thing. I would like to say that, especially with the slavery thing, I would like to say that white people didn't start slavery, but European nations did end it. So that's like a curse and a credit all in one.
So you're just saying about slavery, for example, is that Europeans didn't start it, but they were the ones that ended it. So I guess wanting some acknowledgement for that.
Yes.
Okay. Then I will speak to Evan.
All right.
Yeah, the thing about the world being a dangerous place. When I graduated from high school, I graduated in 3 years instead of 4 because I just wanted to get out of school. I was kind of bored with it. And I wanted to travel, kind of learn by doing. So I took off and I traveled the world for like 10 years, just going all over the place, working, traveling, and working my way up. I'm going to mute you, Megan, because you're getting a bit of an echo on the other phone. Anyway, that was a real learning experience for me. I kind of was conservative, grew up in a conservative evangelical household, and then traveled and just really met all these people all over the world, and they were just like me. Some of them were nice and friendly, and so that really I just saw the common humanity of people all over the world.
Yeah, so you're saying how you graduated from high school, took 3 years instead of 4, and then kind of spent 10 years traveling, and just kind of saw that people were just like you, and you kind of saw the common humanity of things, and and I guess part of that is that you grew up evangelical and conservative, but then it kind of opened your eyes to seeing what people are like out there.
Yeah, and that's when I kind of moved to more progressive, I would say, side, liberal, saying, oh, okay, just this, talking with people from all over the world, integrating was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it, and there's a lot of personal growth about it. So this part about seeing the world as a dangerous place, or I guess dangerous or safe or whatever, are good. That I think that people have just different capacities. There's just a wide variety of capacities people have for doing harm, for supporting each other. So there's that broad spectrum of capacities, and it's a question of which of these capacities do we want to support and nurture.
Okay, so part of that experience was just kind of discovering the broad spectrum of people's capabilities to do harm or to do good, and just the important question to ask is which side of that spectrum do we want to nurture and support?
Yeah, and the positive side, and I'm thinking about judgment too. It's like take this out of a judgment sort of a framework is. So on the positive side, it seems to me that the empathy, that's why I'm so excited or committed to empathy, that empathy is sort of the integrative capacity that, that the different cultures, the different personalities, the that empathy, listening, dialogue, having these dialogues like we're having here, it integrates the two, and it creates that sense of safety, and there is that underlying sense of wanting to contribute. Like I enjoy talking to David, even though he sees the world as a dangerous place. When we talk, we develop a connection, a relationship, and we're kind of nurturing that empathic, positive, contributing kind of side of ourselves.
So you feel like, well, first you're noticing how, talking about things as like the spectrum of good and bad is sort of like, that's the judgment framework. And then how empathy is really the core component that you feel like integrates the two different views of viewing the world as a good and safe place versus a dangerous place. Empathy is where we can come together and listen to both people from both sides and, sort of develop the connection, maybe to integrate everything.
Yeah. And I really appreciate what Megan was saying. And I see that this doesn't happen, is that like the conservatives and the immigrants having empathy circles. I mean, I would love to support that, that we get some of the, the anti-immigration or what have you supporters, and then actual immigrants in an empathy circle where they can really see what is really happening with people who are going through that experience, and so a lot of it's like the pundits talking, it's the media talking, it's the one side or the other side talking, but there's not really a space for all the sides to come together and really, dialogue with each other. And that's something I think that we can support. We can be the ones to create those environments. With what we're doing here, we're building an infrastructure for that.
Yeah, so you're appreciating the idea that Megan brought up, which is conservatives that are anti-immigration having empathy circles with immigrants, and we could be the ones to create that and support that.
And bring in the liberals, so it can be, all the stakeholders, bring them together to have, person-to-person personal dialogues versus being mediated through the social media and the media in general. Have those direct empathic connections.
So liberals can join, just so all the stakeholders are there having in-person or person-to-person dialogues instead of everything being mediated through social media and whatever else.
Yeah, all the magazines, newspapers, and all the other, kind of commercial media. Yeah. You just add that part, I'll be heard.
Yeah, just sort of all the magazines and just the commercial media in general.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thanks.
Cool. Go back to Megan.
I'm listening.
Okay, great. Sorry, just need to stretch. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll bring it back to the idea of, I don't know, something that the idea of taking credit or not taking credit for what your ancestor. Oh, sorry. Let me start over. The idea of responsibility, I think, is really interesting. Well, it is interesting to me. I'm always curious how people define responsibility. I see a lot of people saying statements like, it's your responsibility to do X, Y, Z, or it's this person's responsibility to do that. And I'm always confused by that because I'm like, well, how do you know that? How do you know that it's that responsibility? Where is that written? Maybe I'll pause there.
Okay, so it sounds like kind of related to when I was talking about responsibility. You're wondering like where people even get their ideas about who's responsible for what. If that captures it.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I know that you were just saying, you weren't saying that, you weren't making a statement about where responsibility lies. It sounded like you were saying you just want consistency, which I totally understand. But I'm talking about something else really, which is just trying to define the idea of responsibility and take a step back for a second, because I think responsibility is just really, an idea created by our civilization to try and give people roles. It's sort of a construct to try and make things easier. So I know that there are responsibilities that are written down in our laws, like when someone hits someone's fence, you know, that's where humanity sort of inserted an agreement. Basically, I view responsibility, it's an agreement that we're constantly working on and negotiating.
Okay, so you're trying to take a step back and kind of really understand what responsibility is, and you're seeing it as like a social agreement that makes it easier to understand what people's roles are, and maybe it makes it easier to like resolve conflicts or just deal with things.
Right.
But that it's like made up by humans.
Exactly. It's just an idea. There's no way to, when someone makes a statement like, oh, it's this person's responsibility to do X, there's no way to prove that. It's just an idea that you're what I think is really the meaning behind that is just saying, I want that person to do X, Y, Z, because that meets my need for integrity in my head.
Yeah. So when people say it's this person's responsibility to do such and such a thing, what you really think that means is I want this person to do this thing because, like, for example, maybe it meets their need for their idea of integrity, but that like that's subjective.
Exactly. I guess I'll finish off with one idea, which is I think responsibility is sort of like a really great intro for humanity to start negotiating like roles. And I think we could take it to the next level. For example, like if somebody's working at an event and they bump into a really expensive vase and the vase breaks and it's worth a lot of money to the person that owns, you know, this mansion, let's say. You know, the laws are very, you know, it's very simple. You know, let's say this is the law that when you break something, you have to pay for it. But if the person who's working the event doesn't actually have the money and has no means to help, you know, responsibility it doesn't fit every situation perfectly. So I think a more advanced concept that we could do is more like, you know, what's the best for everyone in each scenario? What's the easiest way where everyone gets the best results comparatively? So, you know, maybe the person who broke the vase, their uncle is a fixer and needs work, and then that person can pay, and it's not, we can't, because blame there is subjective too. That's my finishing thought, but you can reflect that.
So you're saying that you think responsibility is kind of like an introductory level concept to human relations, and that you think like the next level or something that would be better is to look at, to not ask who's responsible, but to ask what could be the best outcome in a situation for everyone. Like including in like an example where someone breaks something, but they don't really have any resources to pay for it.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay. I'll talk to David again.
Okay.
Okay. So I want to say, like, first of all, to kind of help me orient, like, there's some things that I notice that I kind of want to say to respond to some of the things you say, but that I notice that they're kind of sound bites, and they're probably things you've heard before, and I don't think that would be very helpful, and I would like to, like, deepen the conversation. So I'm still, like, searching for that and trying to not just, like, repeat sound bites.
Okay. You said that you'd like to respond to some things that I've said, but right now the current responses that you have might either are or might come across as sound bites, and you would like to deepen the conversation, and that would not help with that. You feel?
Yeah. Like specifically, I mean, like just, like things that people put on like memes on Facebook or whatever, like that you've probably already seen. So it's kind of a waste of time to like say them again in this forum.
Okay, you said that
Like some of the things going through my head are
some of
that.
the things you basically have memes going through your head, or things that could be construed as memes, and you would like, and I'm putting words in your mouth here, but we all see memes every day, and why throw that in the sympathy circle, right?
Yeah. Like, okay, so this is something that I've kind of been wrestling with for a while is like, I don't understand, like when it comes to the idea of property, and it's also just hard to fit into like a few minutes, where I would like to, like if it's not like a soundbite or a meme, then it's hard to say quickly. So there's kind of a catch-22 there. But, like you were saying, to not judge people in the past by like standards of behavior of today. And like I can get that, but what I don't understand is why it's like it seems kind of like there's like this sleight of hand that happens where people don't want, like they're saying, oh, my ancestors, whether they're like blood ancestors or cultural ancestors, like just the people who came before us and kind of worked on creating this thing we call the USA. Like they shouldn't be judged for like things that they did that were like acceptable at the time, but yet their descendants are allowed to like keep the spoils. And it's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't judge the ancestors for what they did, but I don't think like it's not okay to, it's like this weird magic that happens where somebody steals something from someone else, and then if that stolen thing gets passed down a certain number of generations, then there's this attitude of like, oh, the stuff doesn't count anymore. I'll stop there.
All right. You feel like there's some kind of sleight of hand of maybe escaping responsibility by saying something happened in the past, different time, different person, etc. Yet that doesn't negate the fact that the present day people are still benefiting from that action back then, no matter what the context.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's hard to like keep track of all that, but if we're going to be operating from any kind, and then, like I've said before in the circle, like that I consider myself an anarchist, at least to some extent. One of the biggest critiques, or one of the aspects of anarchist philosophy is questioning property. And I think if we're going to even be operating from like a worldview where we say property exists and property is something that can be owned, that it's really important that we seek, consistency again. Like I won't even say like fairness, but just consistency in terms of if somebody steals something, whether, whatever that may be, that, we find some way that we don't just like forget about it because it happened a couple of generations ago.
Okay, you said that essentially that you're an anarchist and you have problems with the concept of property altogether, but that if we are going to talk in terms of property and ownership, I guess in general, that we should have consistency about it. And yeah, essentially that's what you were saying, right?
Yeah, like through time, like if my great grandfather stole something from your great grandfather and then I'm like rich because he invested that, and then you're like, like say that like your great grandfather just led to one thing or another in your family and like it went in a bad direction. Like there's some responsibility there, or we need to rethink our whole idea of property.
Okay. You feel like you reiterated some inconsistencies about like, or the like my grandfather stole something from your grandfather and vice versa. That that's not being acknowledged really, and there should be consistency as far as like ownership, the concepts of ownership and theft. If we're going to have the concept of property at all.
Yeah, and I can't see Edwin, so I'll ask like how my time is.
Oh, I had put up the sign 5 minutes. I didn't.
Okay, yeah, I can only see like either one person or like a certain number of people at a time, but okay.
Okay, that was 5.
But
Okay. Let's continue the rotation. I'll go to Edwin.
Okay, this will probably be the last round until we join another group.
All right. What a lot of people call pursuit of social justice, I view in a lot of ways, in spirit at least, is the pursuit of social revenge.
So the social justice, what people are calling social justice, you see as social revenge?
Yes. And I've heard the argument, people respond to that argument will say, well, of course, you would view it as revenge because you would be the one losing from it. It's basically the has-nots versus the has.
So you see that as social revenge, and people would say to you, of course you see it because it's sort of the haves and the have-nots and the kind of getting restitution or getting something back, or I don't know if that was quite.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'd like to say if it you know, and essentially that's what the worldview or I can tell of radicals at least breaking it down. This is coming directly from Saul Alinsky. It's the has versus the has-nots. So if it's the has versus the has-nots, basically the ends justifies the means. So there's really no such thing as justice.
Okay, so it was a little hard to hear me as this jackhammer in the background. So you're saying that Saul Alinsky is saying the ends justifies the means, and it's really about revenge and not about justice?
Well, I was saying basically it's about the have-nots getting what you know versus the has. So it's basically about getting what you want.
Okay, so let me just reflect that back. So with social justice, you see as social justice means the people who don't have, this is a way for them to get something.
Yes. And there's a lot of people that see me, like maybe on the streets, they'll see me as like some white guy, whatever, and they assume that I've had this privileged lifestyle, and that's been far from the case. It's just I've not allowed envy to consume me. I mean, I've dealt with it in the past. You know, and part of the reason I am the way I am today is living on the streets in San Francisco and just going through my own personal struggle and being surrounded by quote-unquote privileged liberals complaining all day long about what they don't have and what the next millionaire has that they don't have. And I see envy in its purest form.
So you're saying that the liberals that you've been surrounded by, you see that they're coming from a place of envy and they're actually consumed by envy, and you haven't, maybe in the past, but not now, you're not like consumed with envy. Yeah,
and also that I was, during my time being homeless here, part of the reason I am the way I am today is seeing the hypocrisy and the idea in its purest form about people that are actually doing okay, from my perspective, being consumed with anger and envy when I didn't have a place to live, yet these people were going to college and they were just pissed off college kids and they really had nothing to complain about, but it's all they did complain when I actually was living under a bridge, you know, but then they would look at me as a white guy and I have nothing to complain about because I'm white. You know,
okay. So the people,
envy in an assumption.
Okay, so there's all this, and you're seeing envy in the assumption from the liberals that they were going to college, but they have all this envy and and but then they were attributing you didn't have the stuff, anything, and you were living under a bridge, and they're kind of projecting this onto you, that you've had these benefits as being white, but you didn't have those benefits.
Or male or straight or check whatever oppressor box you want.
Yeah, so you feel like you're being put into the oppressor box.
Yes. And so I feel like people, for me personally, I've come to the conclusion there's no altruism. That people use the concept of altruism to manipulate people. Altruism is the idea of selflessness, of course. And I've come to the conclusion that best a person can hope for is to use what you have to get what you want. And along the way, it's nice to try to be a decent person along the way.
So you have some skepticism about the notion of altruism, and that really you just have to kind of think of yourself, do the best for yourself, and then try to be nice to people as well. But you're not really a supporter.
I also feel like that left out that I feel like altruism is being used to manipulate people. The idea of it, like to shame them, like they should be altruistic when it really doesn't exist, and the people trying to shame people for lack of quote unquote empathy. Actually don't have it themselves. They're just using that to shame that person and to acting more selfless to prove that there's something that extensionally no one is.
So you're saying that you feel that altruism is being used as sort of a weapon to shame people, and it's just sort of a manipulative ploy for them to do something that they're not really doing themselves.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I could break it all down.
That was the time, though. But just,
one more.
Okay.
Like, just a core idea as a child that I've had, that I've maintained since the day out today, is can
you speak into the mic?
Why should I care about people who don't care about me?
So you really want to get it out there. It's like, why should you be caring about people who don't care about you? So maybe you're like a bit of reciprocity there.
Yeah, that's a core thing.
Okay. You feel heard? It's time to. Okay. Whew, I have this jackhammer going in the background. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's like it's kind of going in a little bit. Yeah. So, okay, we're going to go back to the conversation can keep going. We, every week we can do this and keep the conversation going. Appreciate everyone's sharing. And we're going to go back to our bigger room here, return to main session. Here we go. Oh, hopefully, did Megan make the shift?
I can hear.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, breakout rooms. Oh, yeah, it's springing. It'll bring everybody in. Looks like they're still got something going. We have 32 seconds. I don't know what they're doing out there. It's like...
It's probably catching them mid-sentence no matter when you click it.
Oh, there they go. Okay, Lou, if you're recording, you can stop the recording because this one will capture it.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm stopping.
Okay.
Well, so I'm waiting for someone to say something. I'm the facilitator.
It's you.
It's me. Okay.
Oh, I'm going to stop the recording. My